After more than 70 years of marriage, Prince Philip made a decision that stunned the public. He left Buckingham Palace and chose to live at Wood Farm on the Sandringham estate away from Queen Elizabeth II. To outsiders, it looked like a royal separation. Some suspected old resentment, private conflict, or the rumors that had followed Philip for decades. But according to the account presented through Princess Anne, supported by King Charles and Prince Andrew, Philip was not leaving the Queen. He was finally leaving a life in which duty had always come before himself. Princess Anne understood him better than almost anyone. She was often called her father's daughter because they shared the same blunt manner, strong-will, sharp humor, and impatience. Their bond was direct and deeply loyal. Anne had watched her parents for decades. She saw the smiles, ceremonies, and image of a perfect royal couple, but she also saw the private cost. She knew what Philip had sacrificed and why the quiet life at Wood Farm became so important to him. The story began long before Buckingham Palace. Elizabeth first met Philip at a wedding in 1934. She was 8 and he was 13. The moment that changed their lives came 5 years later at the Britannia Royal Naval College in Dartmouth, Devon. Elizabeth was 13. Philip was 18. An outbreak of mumps and chickenpox disrupted the visit, so Philip was asked to entertain Elizabeth and her sister at the headmaster's house. Philip soon went outside, played croquet, jumped over tennis nets, and displayed the confidence and athletic energy that defined him. Elizabeth was captivated. During the war years, they exchanged letters while Philip served in the Royal Navy. She kept his photograph in her bedroom and later made it clear that after Dartmouth, she never seriously looked at anyone else. In 1946, Philip returned from the Pacific Theatre and proposed at Balmoral. Elizabeth accepted, but King George VI hesitated. He feared she was too young and wondered whether she had chosen the first man who captured her imagination. Others in the royal family considered Philip too rough. Too foreign, too Greek, too German, and not sufficiently English for the future queen. Elizabeth refused to change her mind. Philip, meanwhile, accepted the sacrifices required to marry her. He renounced his Greek and Danish royal titles, entered the Church of England, and adopted the surname Mountbatten. On October 3, 1947, the Archbishop of Canterbury formally received him into the church. On November the 20th, 1947, Princess Elizabeth married Philip at Westminster Abbey in London. Afterward, Philip continued his naval career and advanced quickly. Their son Charles was born, followed by Anne. Philip was posted to Malta, and Elizabeth joined him while the children remained in England. For a short time, they lived something close to a normal married life. Philip had a career. Elizabeth was a naval officer's wife, and their futures seemed to belong to them. Everything changed in 1952. King George VI died only 5 years after the wedding. Elizabeth was 25. Philip was 30. They had expected more time before the crown took control of their lives, but fate gave them none. Elizabeth became Queen Elizabeth II. Philip would not become king. He would serve as her consort and remain behind her. They were in Kenya when the news arrived. Philip told Elizabeth that her father had died, and they returned immediately to Britain. He gave up his naval career and devoted himself to supporting the monarchy. It was a profound loss for a man trained to command ships, make decisions, and lead. In public, he often walked several steps behind his wife. In state affairs, she held the authority, and he had no final say. In the 1950s, it was rare for a husband to live publicly beneath the authority of his wife. Philip accepted it because he loved Elizabeth and understood her duty, but the personal cost never disappeared. He later admitted that he had expected a long naval career. Instead, he had to compromise, and that compromise lasted for the rest of his life. On June 2, 1953, Elizabeth was crowned at Westminster Abbey. Philip became the first person to kneel before her and swear loyalty for life. The scene showed his devotion, but it also defined his new position. He was her husband, yet before the nation, he was also her subject. One early conflict concerned the family name. Philip's uncle, Louis Mountbatten, declared that the House of Mountbatten now reigned in England. Queen Mary and Prime Minister Winston Churchill opposed the idea and insisted that the royal house remain Windsor. Philip was furious. He complained that he was the only man in the country who could not pass his name to his children. Elizabeth understood how deeply this hurt him. In February 1960, she announced that certain descendants would use the surname Mountbatten-Windsor. It was a compromise, but it did not solve the larger problem. Philip still had to create a role inside an institution centered entirely on his wife. He later described his position as trial and error. When he asked what was expected of a royal consort, no one had a clear answer. Philip was energetic, curious, outspoken and restless, yet the system expected him to support rather than lead. His first duty was obvious. He had to serve the Queen. Everything else had to be invented. Philip responded by trying to modernize the monarchy. He supported televising Elizabeth's coronation, allowing more than 20 million people to watch. He became the first royal family member to sit for a television interview, and later cameras entered royal homes for a documentary. He encouraged Elizabeth to end the presentation of debutantes at court, promoted informal lunches and garden parties, and pushed for a less rigid royal household. In 1957, he encouraged her to televise the Christmas message and helped her use a teleprompter. He also embraced computers, emails, and electronic speech writing. By the 1980s, Philip had written 9 books. He read widely, especially history, and constantly searched for new subjects. Elizabeth often acknowledged him in speeches with the phrase, "my husband and I." The wording became a national joke, but it reflected a serious truth. She knew his contribution was far greater than his formal position suggested. Their marriage was not always peaceful. They argued like any couple. During one drive to Cowdray Park, Elizabeth repeatedly reacted to Philip's speed. He finally warned that if she continued, he would put her out of the car. At other times, Elizabeth sharply told him to be quiet in front of the staff, and he left the room in frustration. These moments did not prove the marriage was collapsing. They revealed the strain created when 2 strong personalities lived under extraordinary pressure. Philip sometimes treated Elizabeth like an ordinary wife, even when the world treated her as a sacred institution. Elizabeth sometimes reminded him that she was not only his wife, but also the sovereign. The most damaging rumors involved alleged infidelity. Philip's charm and flirtatious manner made him an easy target. Journeys aboard the Royal Yacht Britannia in the 1950s and friendships with women fueled speculation. He was linked to a Russian ballerina, an English stage actress, and a writer. The Baltimore Sun once claimed he met an unnamed woman at a West End apartment. Buckingham Palace denied the story. Philip responded by asking whether anyone had ever seen him go anywhere without a police escort. His point was simple. Secret affairs would have been extremely difficult while he was constantly watched. Biographers continued to debate the rumors, but no alleged affair was ever confirmed. What was confirmed was his long support for Elizabeth. During their 50th wedding anniversary, the Queen called Philip her strength and stay. She said he had given more support than he would ever claim, and more than others would ever know. They later celebrated their diamond and platinum anniversaries. Elizabeth repeatedly thanked him for standing beside her through decades of duty. Then came the decision that created the final mystery. In May 2017, Buckingham Palace announced that Prince Philip would retire from public life. He completed his final official engagement on August 2, 2017, with the Royal Marines. He was 96 and had spent about 7 decades in public service. After retirement, he left Buckingham Palace and moved to Wood Farm on the Sandringham estate. To some people, the move looked like a break from Elizabeth. For Philip, it was freedom. In a 2011 interview when he was 90, he had already said that he wanted time to enjoy himself. He continued working until 96, but when retirement finally came, he wanted it to be real. He did not want to remain surrounded by official schedule staff and the constant pull of royal duty. Philip knew that if he stayed at the center of the monarchy, he would continue trying to involve himself. At Wood Farm, he wanted privacy and simplicity. When he arrived and saw cooks, telephonists, and other staff waiting for him, he was reportedly horrified. He did not want another palace. The Queen approved the decision. She knew what he had sacrificed and how faithfully he had supported her. At Wood Farm, Philip could read history, paint watercolors, speak with friends, drive, and enjoy carriage driving. He had taken up carriage driving because arthritis in his wrists made polo impossible. Later, he stopped when he could no longer control the horses safely. What began as a short stay became a lasting arrangement. Philip did not return to live full-time at Buckingham Palace. He and Elizabeth spent long periods apart, but they did not cut each other out of their lives. They spoke on the telephone every day and shared what had happened. The Queen visited Wood Farm, family members visited, and the couple met at Windsor Broadlands, Balmoral, and important royal occasions. Philip still attended major family events, including the weddings of Prince Harry, Princess Eugenie, Lady Gabriella Windsor, and Princess Beatrice. Retirement meant he could choose when and how to participate. Age brought new limits. In January 2019, Philip drove onto a main road near Sandringham and collided with another vehicle. His SUV overturned. At 97, he escaped without serious injury, but the driver and passenger in the other car were hurt. Philip apologized. 3 weeks later, he voluntarily surrendered his driving license. He could still drive on private estates and was seen behind the wheel at Windsor Castle in April 2019. He also faced the loneliness of extreme age. Within a year, he lost 3 close friends, as well as a valet who had served him for 40 years. His short-term memory weakened as he approached 100. The public anticipated the milestone, but Philip disliked fuss and attention. In March 2020, the COVID-19 lockdown unexpectedly brought Philip and Elizabeth back together at Windsor Castle. Their protected household became known jokingly as HMS Bubble. They used Zoom to remain in contact with relatives. After years of living in different homes, the pandemic gave them an extended period under the same roof. On July 22, 2020, Philip made his final public appearance. He stood in the quadrangle at Windsor Castle and transferred his position as Colonel-in-Chief of the Rifles to the Duchess of Cornwall. In January 2021, Philip and Elizabeth received COVID-19 vaccinations from a household doctor at Windsor. The following month, he entered King Edward VII's hospital after feeling unwell. Buckingham Palace later said he was being treated for an infection. He also underwent a successful heart procedure before returning home. Talk turned to his approaching 100th birthday, but Philip appeared to understand that he might not reach it. On the morning of April 9, 2021, 3 weeks after returning home, Prince Philip died at Windsor Castle at the age of 99. Queen Elizabeth was by his side. The palace said his death was peaceful. The Queen later admitted that his passing had left a huge void in her life. His funeral took place on April 17, 2021 at St. George's Chapel in Windsor Castle. His coffin was temporarily placed in the royal vault. His will was sealed for at least 90 years to protect the dignity and standing of the Queen. That secrecy created speculation, but the account provides no proof that the will contained anything damaging. Princess Anne remembered Philip as her teacher, supporter, and critic. She admired his ability to recognize every person as an individual with unique skills. She also understood that his support had allowed Elizabeth to become queen at 25 and carry the burden of the crown with confidence. King Charles praised his father's extraordinary energy and his 70 years of devotion to the Queen, the royal family, Britain, and the Commonwealth. Prince Andrew remembered him as a father who valued time with his family. Their words supported the same conclusion. Philip's move to Wood Farm was not an act of rejection. It was the final chapter of a life dominated by service. A year after Philip's death, Queen Elizabeth continued to speak of the memories they had shared. On September 8, 2022, she died at the age of 96 and was laid to rest beside her husband. In life, they spent their final years in different homes. In truth, they never stopped being connected.